John Sanei.
Mark Sham.
Thank you for being here, bro.
My pleasure. Always good to be here.
I have been on a whirlwind creating these interview/conversations. It's been lots of fun.
I've been watching.
And I've
Well
been
done.
dying to have you be here, but you
Thank
have
you.
been, in normal circumstances, you would be my first person I would
Thank
interview
you.
above all else.
Thank
But that
you.
wasn't possible because you were isolating far and wide in another world. Do you want to just share a little bit about what's been happening in your life?
Well, I mean, I was sitting on the beach in Dubai when I read that Italy was going into shutdown. And I'm sure you'll agree, it was the first time we'd ever heard of anything like that. 60 million people in shutdown. And I was on the beach in Dubai with my friend Jasmine, and I was like, this is definitely coming to Dubai. And so I immediately made a decision to leave Dubai, put my apartment up, put my stuff in storage. And the next day I flew out of Dubai to Joburg, quarantine for 2 weeks, and then I've been living on a farm with my parents for the last 2.5 months or so. And I haven't really had any interaction with the world in any way. I've just been interacting with my parents and the dogs on the farm, which was awesome and also quite isolating. And so just the last few days I've come to Joburg for the very first time, having to put a mask on and go through the process that everybody else has been going through for the last month or two. So it's been jarring, quite stark to try and experience this. But the isolation in nature, being around, surrounded by forest and avocado trees, has been exceptional in so many different ways, giving me time to rethink, pause and reinvent.
And I can imagine that it must be quite a morbid smack in the face almost when you come from the farm to here, because we've gone through the assimilation process over the last few months. I remember when I went to the Woolworths or the grocery store to get stuff the first few times, it felt really weird, people masks on, you staying far away from people, but then we kind of got, it's kind of been normal.
Isn't that weird about human beings? You know, we get kind of used to things. Like it was just like, okay, well, that's just the way it is now, which I think obviously is necessary, but I hadn't experienced it. So for me, it's been quite a jarring process. Going back to the farm in a couple of days' time, which I'm actually looking forward to now that I've seen like the city is not like it used to be. There isn't that vibrance to it at the moment. So I'm retracting for another couple of weeks, and hopefully it would have changed a little bit by the time I come back again.
Well, I think two things there that are fascinating to me is one, how quickly people adapt, especially when they feel pain, and I'd love to get into that with you. And then, how people just kind of get going with what becomes the new normal.
Yeah.
But I think we clearly needed the smack. The more I think about it, that COVID has brought. I wrote an article the other day, or a post. I was observing more than I was frustrated that people only really tend to move when they feel pain. And for the longest time, the world at large, people from lower class and low income all the way up, haven't felt this collective pain, certainly not in my lifetime. And now the world is feeling it. And I'm hoping that it really does bring about enormous change because everybody's felt that pain.
So I think, there's a percentage of the population that this is the worst thing that's ever happened to them, being on the breadline and not being able to earn money. So I don't want to take anything away from that suffering. But if you're in a privileged position where you have food and you're in a warm house, I think this is the biggest gift you've ever had in your life. Because I think most people in those situations were desperate for some time to pause, think, and recalibrate what's going on in the world. But we're at such a pace, I mean, you and I especially, and many other people, we're at such a pace on the brink of exhaustion most of the time, and on the brink of pushing ourselves, because we weren't being malicious or ignorant, we were just part of the process of what the world was doing. And I think this pause has been just an incredible gift. But we must also remember that the virus has two endings. It has the medical ending and the socio-economic ending. And the medical ending is coming a lot sooner than the socio-economic ending. The socio-economic ending is brought to the surface, Black Lives Matter, and so much systemic racism that's been with us for so long, but also the lack of leadership and the lack of our own emotional fitness. It's brought so much to the surface, and we're not going to see the end of that for a while to come, and also the domino effect of all the bankruptcies that we're not going to see for a while to come. So people are in this desperation for familiarity and normality to go back to where it was, but it's impossible for it to go back to where it was, because one, normality was based on the constructs that we had built for 150 years. That's disappeared, it's dissipated, it's dissolved. And we think we're going to go back to normal and things are going to carry on, but what about the 40% of airlines that won't be flying again? And what about the 60% of retail stores and restaurants that won't be opening again? And what about the people that have much less money as disposable income? So I think we must realize that we are still very much in the eye of the storm.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think that the rate at which humanity in general overconsumed and has been overconsuming has been frightening.
Yeah.
But what this time has also taught, certainly me, and again, I think you're spot on when you say it's not about trying to be insensitive to the people at the bottom, the poor, because this is really hurting them
Big time.
in a horrible way. And that's the ugly part about this.
Yeah.
But then, so if we can just put them aside momentarily, and I'll get back to that. If you have a bit of income, a roof over your head, food, you've had to learn that you can do far more with far less. And actually, it's been quite a good lesson. You don't need everything that you buy. You don't have to buy as much as you do or you used to buy. And it's been such a fascinating lesson. You talk about how much we were traveling. And I love that. And there's a part of me that wants to get back to that. And I think that we will find better solutions in terms of how to move people around with less impact on the environment, etc. But it's actually been quite interesting being like pushed into one place for a specific time. When in your life have you been so isolated in 3 months almost in one space?
Never. And I think it's the isolation has both been quite taxing on my social need for engagement, but also forced me to spend more time with myself, which is a really hell of a thing, because people go to ashrams in India to kind of like experience this isolation and spending time with yourself. So we've had that gift. But ultimately what I think is going to happen to us as consumers is the Maslow hierarchy of needs was turned upside down because of what's happened with COVID. And if you think about the Maslow hierarchy of needs, the bottom was physiological health, then emotional health, then financial health, and then self-actualization right on the top there, right? And so the first thing that I did when I heard about COVID, I immediately prioritized the bottom of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, my physiological health. Am I going to make it through this disease? Am I healthy enough? Is my immune system high enough? Where do I need to be to maintain an immune system that I need to be? The second question I asked is, I need to be with family. I don't know how long this isolation is going to happen. The third thing is going to be, do I have enough cash flow to hold me out if business doesn't pick up again? That's the furthest thing from self-actualization. It's exactly the opposite, in fact. So I think what we're going to see in the world now is us coming out of this, still prioritizing the journey of financial well-being, emotional well-being, and physical well-being. Because also remember, a lot of our emotions have been exposed and are raw. And so we haven't had the luxury of time to deal with trauma, and now we do. And so now we realize that, listen, the most important thing right now is to go back to basics, spending time with your family and health and immunity, and then build again. And I think we must realize it's a transition phase. We've ended one world, we're in the transition before we get birthed into the new world. And so yes, of course our priorities have changed, and having 18 pairs of shoes becomes pointless and actually ridiculous. Having 5 cars, it's just like, it's brash and unnecessary. Having the sort of need for entertainment in retail perspectives makes you actually think about it and said, well, every time I went in for a coffee, I'd go past the Adidas store to look as entertainment, to want to buy something else. And we've got to realize that that was broken. That's not entertainment. Retail therapy is actually harmful and ridiculous if you think about it. So I've also been preaching this concept around minimalism in life. And this has forced us to become minimalists. And I think it's important for us to practice this. It's a great quote. It says, the wealthiest man is not the man who has the most, but the one who needs the least. And so in this process, it's about needing the least. It's about having as little as possible that's holding you down, so you can be adaptable and nimble and flexible and move into the future with less baggage.
I mean, it's really profound what you're saying, because I've just even noted in my own life, and even with us, I mean, we talk so often. If it weren't for you originally, I was kind of sitting on the brink of, what do I do? Do I stay in London? Do I come back? And you helped put those things into perspective for me. Go to a place where you're close to people, your base, where you can be looked after, where you have a roof over your head, etc. And that actually turned out to be the best move.
I remember
ever.
that chat. Yeah.
And then also on top of that, you talk about the minimalistic side. The thing that I've missed the most through this process wasn't eating out at restaurants more, although I miss some restaurants, but it's like seeing my people, missing my friends. And so again, this is where I've seen the real value, but I'm coming from a privileged perspective. I had a roof over my head and food, etc. That the thing, because that was met, the thing I was just missing the most and have missed the most is pure human interaction. I haven't longed for wanting to buy more clothing, etc., to your point. So the minimalism thing like really resonates with me, and the way you refer to Maslow's hierarchy of needs being flipped. I think people intrinsically get that, but when you see that picture of it literally flipping upside down, it puts it in perfect.
And it's amazing, because we've adopted to the need for physiological health immediately. It was like just such a human instinct. It's like immediately move into, am I going to survive this, the virus? That was the first thing. Are my parents okay? Is my family okay? Are my friends okay? Remember, when have you ever done that? Ever in our lives. So look, Gucci is one of, look, I'm not into luxury brands, but Gucci is one of the first luxury brands that's woken up to this, and they've pulled themselves out of the fashion show cycle. They've realized now that luxury is going to be changing dramatically, because luxury has always been a destination of purchase. Now it's going to be the journey of living. And so 80% of people that bought luxurious brands are upper middle class. 20% are the affluent. The affluent will stay the affluent, but the 80% upper middle class have been hurt. They don't have the financial means anymore. And also they've been in a process of being at home and cleaning out their cupboards and seeing 18 Louis Vuitton bags. And they're also thinking to themselves, what am I doing? Like, what happened here that I was so caught up in this world? And so there's a lot of decluttering that's going on at home. And in fact, initially when you looked at the shopping stats, you saw people buying the essentials, the toilet papers and the foods and rusks and things that could last as long as possible. Then immediately you started to see a switch into DIY, into fixing your home, into rethinking where you're living. And immediately the sales move from essentials to DIY goods. And in that DIY good, people are starting to clean out and rethink and declutter. So I think we're going to see a brand new consumer behavior come out of this situation.